Hello there guys, it's Joey and this is going to be a requested video. We're going to be talking about deepening our relationship to the goddess Morrigan, and this was sort of put to me a week or so ago as a question with regards to once you've dedicated and you have realised that the goddess Morrigan is calling to you, speaking to you, and you have embraced that and engaged with that on a spiritual level, how do you then go about deepening the connection, and how do you understand, interpret, hear messages? How do you know that you are doing right by your goddess and it's not, you know, more of an ego thing, I think. And this kind of tips into something which I do talk about with people when they ask, which is sort of the silent phases of the goddess Morrigan which do occur. And we're going to talk about that. So the first thing that I think is worth driving home right from the beginning is that there is no one template to connecting to any god or goddess that's going to work for everybody. Spiritual paths, particularly pagan spiritual paths, are diverse. They are highly personalised, and there is no set rule book or set guideline to connecting with deity. There are suggestions, and there are ideas, and there are similar themes that most people do embrace, which we'll go over some of those as sort of ideas. But the first point that I really want to talk about, and I think is really very important, and has taken me a minute to come back to myself, it's actually a highly personalized thought process, and something that I'm really putting into practice and talking about as well as considering, is the fact that our paths are personal. They are highly individual. They are not really open for debate, or they shouldn't be, and sadly sometimes they are. And I think this is a problem for a lot of people, that they feel that they might be doing something wrong in their spiritual path for whatever reason, for wherever the preconception comes from, and they maybe speak about it publicly, or via sorts of social media publicly anyway. And the internet is full of judgment, and it scares people off, and then they get very upset or very depressed or very unhappy with the way that they have proceeded thus far, particularly if they were seeking advice, mentors, teachers, or a group to really engage with, to really elevate their understanding. And I can speak from personal experience. This has happened to me, where you go looking for people who you feel could take you and expand you within a particular goddess sort of circle to a better understanding, and what you meet with is hostility. So I understand people being very, very passionate about the god or goddess that they follow, and not wanting it to become a sort of running joke or trivialized in any manner. And I think the problem becomes when there is a level of disregard and disdain for those who are seeking to learn, and have no intention of disregarding or disdaining or their goddess. So I think that applies on a whole range, to a whole range of gods, a whole range of goddesses, and is a point worth noting, that the highly individualized circumstance of our path, paganism if you like, it's perhaps the easiest terminology, but again, just given the fact that paganism is an umbrella term for a whole host of different spiritual paths, and even within those sort of subdividers of spiritual path, if you like, then there's a whole host of ranges of how people see and define, when really perhaps it's a sort of impossibility to define a spiritual path in terms of what we're actually doing and following. And the whole point of labeling is really to close in the walls around us anyway. It kind of once we have dedicated ourselves to a certain box, it kind of limits us in a way, if that makes sense. So the first thing that I really am trying to address is the idea of being okay with your highly personalized path and knowing there is no set guidebook, and there are many different ways to follow different gods and goddesses. And really, why you follow a god or goddess, or a god or goddess has chosen you or spoken to you, is usually about the individual person that you are, the potential that you have within you, perhaps the difficulties and trials you have overcome. With particular regards to the goddess Morrigan, this is mostly the case in the experiences of other individuals that have spoken to me and my own personal individual circumstances, is that those who have felt the calling of the goddess Morrigan have often been through a heck of a lot of shit, just to put it straight down there. You know, they have overcome hurts and harms and trials and tribulations, and they have survived. And more than that, they have perhaps conquered. They have overcome that, and they know that overcoming is not necessarily an instantaneous thing, but it is a decision, a choice, that they at some point on a conscious and unconscious level decided to push through the difficulties, whatever they might be. And perhaps they had all these things done to them, but they still chose to keep going and fight against it and overcome in a world which perhaps is a little bit against those who find themselves, I don't want to say victimized, because I don't like the idea of putting somebody in a victim box, but often the abusers get away with a far lot, so much more with regards to the legal system, the social system. You know, we can talk about Brock Turner, we can talk about you know, his sentencing versus people who have been shot and are innocent, and it's just a whole another point actually, because that comes into choosing a course for yourself. So choosing a course within one's spirituality comes from within, and there are times in one's life where one can feel completely conflicted, completely lost, and that is part of the reason that we come to spirituality, is for a better understanding of ourselves, our place in the world, our place with regards to and relation to deity, and then to better understand the mysteries of the world around us, to connect to deity through whatever channel we best connect through, and what most appeals to us usually, and how we flow through the universe, and how the universe flows through us, and how we interact with that is often a figurehead, is often deity, is often a god or a goddess, for the sake of the human lens, because sometimes it's very, very difficult to work in the abstract sometimes. I worked in the abstract for a long, long time, so I kind of chewed around with concepts of abstract god and goddess for a long, long time, but many people feel it is less personal. So having chosen or being chosen by a god or goddess, depending on the circumstance, for the goddess Morrigan, it is very much she speaks to her chosen, if you like. She chooses, she decides, and there's no real ignoring that choosing or deciding. Now I was going to say it can't be mistaken, and I can't. I don't think the choosing part can be mistaken. And usually I think when she comes forth, there's a very, very strong, determined presence of wake up and notice in most circumstances, and there's lots of key signs. There might be a little bit of figuring out those signs, of challenging you to use your brain to acknowledge the symbolism and work out the pieces of the puzzle. But once that initial very, very abrupt forthcoming of information, there's quite often periods of quite, I'm not going to say long, but there are periods of contemplation and silence with the goddess Morrigan, which I have experienced myself to a large degree, as well as knowing that other people have experienced these as well. And for some people they can be quite disconcerting. I tend to feel that this is in alignment with her title of the Silent Watcher, and it's kind of funny. I was thinking about this morning, as how I was going to really sort of address this part of connecting to the goddess Morrigan when she is standing back a little and being silent a little. And I realised this is behaviour that I engage in, and it's not something I necessarily mean to engage in either. It's just that there are times in my life where I completely step back from everything. And I'm guessing it can be very disconcerting for certain people, that I just step back from situations, particularly if I need that space for whatever reason. Illness is the most obvious one of late. And I step back and just, I know I'm still there, but perhaps it's disconcerting to other people. And I was thinking how funny it is that I do this, and then I'm not put out by Morrigan doing this, and then I realised it's something that I reflect, that I engage in, and perhaps from when other people don't at all engage in such hermity behaviours, it can be quite disconcerting that she will go so silent after a period of being so present. So I do tend to talk to people about that, especially when they're new to it and they're having lots of signs, and lots of meditations or dreams and things of that nature. So I do tend to say you may get periods of where she's just quiet and silent and stands back, and it's can be quite disconcerting the first time it happens, or even, it can be quite disconcerting every time, because a lot of people like to feel that they are so connected, and having that presence can be quite confirming and quite comforting for a lot of us, to know that something very physical has happened, very in the physical realm. There is a manifestation, there is symbols everywhere, there is a lot of perhaps noise, if you like, affirming that this is your path. So I often warn people about the balance. There is the balance between the noise and then the silence, and I think it's how you engage with it. I think that during those times of silence is chewing over the lessons, understanding what you have been told already, which is hugely individual again. This is such a difficult thing to really pin down a lot of the time, because a lot of the concepts are personal and quite abstract. I'm going to do my best. There's some strange noises coming from over there. Isn't that weird? You talk about noises and signs, and very strange noises from the corner of the room. I have no idea what that is. It's like a creaking from... Well, I wasn't quite expecting that on this video, but there you go. I hope you can hear it, otherwise I'm sounding completely nuts. Well, at least that feels like confirmation then. There's a load of creaking, weird creaking in the corner of the room. Anyway, to be put out completely. So, what was I saying before the weird creaks? And now it's stopped. And now it's stopped. That's so weird. So wonderful. See? Confirmation. Weird things. Noise versus silence. Now's the minute I have to sit here and digest what that means on my videos. Wow. Okay. So, having said that one's path is hugely personal, and it's very, very difficult to pin down how one best connects on a deeper level to any god or goddess, but we're talking obviously about the goddess Morrigan here. One has to really realise what it is that is within us that meant that the goddess called to us? What elements of ourselves appeals to the goddess Morrigan that she would speak to us and embrace us and seek us to go forward in a working communication and relationship, if you like, with the goddess Morrigan? And sometimes these are going to be very difficult questions. Sorry, I had a real black flash go over my eyes. Now I'm going to wonder if that's going to be on video. That's a little bit. It's a little bit odd. Wonderful. Black flash over the eyes. Wonderful. Okay. Hi, Mama. So we have to see as if we are looking at ourselves through the gauge of a goddess almost. And sometimes she will have alerted you to the circumstances, the reasons behind the choosing, behind the choice, and alerted you to, you know, the behaviours that you have engaged in at any given time that have caught her eye, caught her attention. In my circumstance, I don't know how different it is from anybody else, but I have always spoken to Mother and I just didn't know who it was. And it's come to my attention recently that, you know, some people disdain of calling her a mother figure, as if she was nurturing and kindly, and I disagree. I don't think that applying the psychological terminology for a caring, nurturing mother to a goddess is necessarily fitting of all a role a mother can be. For me, the idea that a mother suddenly becomes nurturing and gentle and sweet just because she's a mother doesn't really make sense to me. Can a mother not be ferocious? Can a mother not be creative? Can a mother not be wild? Can she not be protective? Can she not be fierce? Can she not be even aggressive? And I was thinking about this a little bit more and further too with regards to, well, what does it say about me that I needed the role of the goddess Morrigan, that she stepped in. And it's, to me, the only mother role that I've ever engaged with was hugely destructive, disruptive, and abusive. So the kind of mother that I always wished I had was a strong mother. Not necessarily a babying mother. I've never really cared to be babied. I prefer a sort of being treated like an adult, even from a very young age. But someone to be proud of, to be fiercely proud of, who would pick you up, pick you up, you can do it, come on. And it was like a reinforcement without being soft, I guess. I never really wanted a soft, nurturing figurehead for a mother. I wanted a mother who didn't bow down to men, because given my upbringing, the only mother role that I ever saw was a woman submitting to men, genuinely believing that men were above women, and generally and treating other women with disdain. And that's never something that I wanted to have within my own relationship to deity, relationship to goddess. And I realised that perhaps by adopting that role, she has already been engaging with shadow work with me to a large degree. And this is kind of one of these sneaky, deeper connections to the goddess that you're sort of made aware of, that the minute, someone starts to suggest that you're wrong for doing something in a certain way, you look at what you're doing and start to realise the depths of it, and then realise, well, I don't think it is wrong. It's just perhaps not necessarily what everybody else is doing or saying, and so on and so forth. Again, it can be very, very difficult to deepen one's relationship when from all angles people are telling you that, you know, you're wrong. And on a large scale, unless people ask me, if people ask me, I will talk about it with them. But if people don't ask me, I don't go inquiring into people's personal relationship with their goddess, especially if it's the goddess Morrigan, because I don't really feel it's my place to be delving into the souls of other people and defining whether or not they're doing something right. It's none of my business, frankly. And that, I guess, as a point, it's kind of difficult to really tell an individual how that they should deepen their relationship with the goddess. There are many different ways that might reflect as a part of who you are, and I said I was going to make some suggestions, and I'm going to make some suggestions that I've heard of that may or may not resonate with you on any level. So some people engage in physical warrior activity to honour the goddess Morrigan, and that can be anything from warrior training in terms of, you know, sword training or archery training, to perhaps some martial art training, although, you know, some people would then be disdainful of that because martial arts is not Celtic in origin. Me personally, I think if you're engaging in some sort of physical activity and you use that to honour the goddess, then in a modern, I take on a very evolutionary perspective with regards to my spirituality, and there are those that can better advise you that if you want a more stoic, unmoving, based in the myth alone perspective, there are people who do that very well, and that's their perspective, and you can get advice from them and go for it. But for me, I'm more evolutionary, and I feel that the goddess evolves as humans evolve, because there is a staticness to deity, particularly in paganism. Otherwise, it would have died off and never come back. And I believe in embracing who we are as people, as well as where we've come from, and as well as where we're going. And so I feel it's more fluidity. So if you're engaging in physical activities such as martial arts, such as dance in some form or another, there are many, many different kinds, even sort of dedicating, you know, going running or in the gym, using that sort of physical exertion as a form of honouring deity. If you're a very physical individual and you feel that that is in keeping with a sort of warrior training, then that is one way in which you can deepen and honour the goddess Morrigan. There are those that then say there is a more healing aspect of the goddess Morrigan, and I perhaps fall into this, I don't know, with the kind of vocal perspective of sharing and discussing. Those who have survived perhaps emotional, physical, spiritual, mental trauma, who then go on to talk and advise and try and reach out to like-minded individuals, or those that have either been through or are suffering some form of abuse themselves, and try and help them through, try and make it known that they're not alone, that they don't need to be ashamed, that you know, that they can get through, and there are those that will help them. So that perhaps takes on a more healer aspect, and then there is a more sort of academic aspect of honouring the goddess Morrigan. I would recommend reading the myths anyway, even though I don't adhere to a strict, perhaps a very, very strict, very unmoving discipline of the goddess Morrigan and sticking to those myths, because I think as a student of history, I studied history up to degree level at university, I know that there is too much in the way in terms of bias, in terms of sources and facts and data. And there's a huge argument and debate within the central core of a lot of historical disciplines with regards to what is a fact and whether or not a fact in history can actually exist. Because a fact is immovable. It's just the truth of a matter, if you like. And in maths and science, perhaps that's a more plausible. Again, you can argue in those that it's limited by human knowledge, but we're talking history. So we look at the myths of, say, deity or the Celts, and a lot of it is second-hand information. Some of it is being written by people who are not Celts, mostly written by people who are not Celts, with their own biases, and then things get destroyed, and then things get translated, and there is human error. So with regards to facts in disciplines, I think it's difficult for me to want to say that something is definitely this or definitely that, depending on the text. And there's interpretation. There's our personal interpretation of certain words, the roots of words. We go delving in. I think all that sort of thing is fascinating. I studied it up to degree level. I think, you know, the history and the picking apart and the relearning and the way people experience things is hugely fascinating. I love it. But I'm under no impression that I am living in an era where following the same exact spiritual path of somebody who lived whenever is plausible or feasible. We're talking, as I record myself on a contraption to put myself on the internet, whereby people will watch a video on their electronic devices. So it kind of, that to me, you know, we don't live in a world as they lived in a world, and we have evolved and we have changed and we have invented, and for me I take on an evolutionary perspective of God and Goddess as a result. And again, personal perspective. I'm not ever going to tell anybody that it's my way or the highway. Bye-bye, because I really don't like that perspective from other people, which I've come across, and I'm like, okay, and I can't tell you how to deepen your relationship with the Goddess verbatim. I can't say, this is how you do it in 6 easy steps, and I'm sure that would be a far more popular video, like 1, 2, ha ha ha. Right, Sesame Street. Anyway, we have gone off the beaten path now, and now we have screaming children. Great. Every time I do a video in this area, I don't know what it is. So, what else? Let's do some steps, seeing as I said I can't do it that way. The other things you can do, of course, are creating altar setups, so you have a permanent place of worship to engage in ritual and spiritual growth. So we talked a little bit perhaps about some different areas, like warrior training could be a physical one, the academic could be a mental one, and then your spiritual sort of center could be a spiritual and emotional basis. And you don't have to have a big altar. You can have a little shrine. I tend to feel that the Goddess likes her permanent altar. And I technically have an altar over there and a shrine over there, which are permanent fixtures. The location may change from time to time for whatever reason, but there is a definite physical presence of an altar. And the reason that I enjoy having my altar is that I feel that an altar is a physical manifestation of the representation of the relationship between myself and my deity, the goddess Morrigan. And I may change that up a little bit, I may shift it around a bit. I definitely clean it regularly and have a good cleanse down and have, you know, and anoint things, and then I give offerings. Offerings are another way of sort of honouring your relationship with the goddess Morrigan. And again, what you actually offer is often largely personal. Currently, I like to do an incense, and I like to give whiskey. And the whiskey I have currently, I should have grabbed it really, but it has a Triskel on it, and I saw it and I looked at it and I thought, it's kind of funny. I'll tell you a story. I've been buying Irish whiskey for obvious reasons a long time, for giving a little bit each day to honour the goddess Morrigan. And I went to purchase some more when I was out, and they didn't have any. They only had Scottish. And I thought, it'll be okay, won't it? It'll be okay. No. I got this kind of irky feeling the first time that she didn't like this, whether it was the shifting or whether it was because she didn't like the particular whiskey, I'm not sure. But I got a feeling like, well, that's not. And the very next day I went to pour it and I accidentally knocked over the entire bottle. So that was the end of that, and I went out and I found the one with the Triskel on it, and I was like, aha. Right, okay. So you do get these feelings, you know, these you do feel like when something doesn't quite feel right with regards to what you're offering, with regards to what you're doing, and you kind of start to realise that that sort of intuitiveness is about deepening your relationship, is about listening to your own instincts with regards to how best to serve and deepen a relationship with the goddess Morrigan. And I think that is largely the point I've been trying to drive home most of the video, that your own instincts are going to take over and you're going to know instinctually what feels correct. And there are these paths of, you know, engaging in physical, mental and spiritual path journeying, which best suits your individual personality to honour deity, to be the best version of you. And that's a difficult concept to really express, because who we are changes, who we are evolves. We're not going to stay the same, because that sort of creates a stagnancy within us and isn't good for us. Change is the only constant, as they say. And I think that how you best deepen your relationship is never going to be a stagnant thing. It's going to be a change, a flow, a shapeshift, an evolution. And it's really about figuring out who you are and who you are becoming, and then being that to the best of your ability. There's no point trying to be anybody else, because you're going to fail wholeheartedly. It's slapped down on your face, because that's not who you are. It's not you being honest with who you are either. I think there needs to be a promise, an oath, and that's something else I want to cover before this video is finished. With regards to sincerity, I think the best thing that you can really do with regards to your god or goddess is to listen with an open heart and an open mind in all sincerity, and with a good deal of humility, because, you know, nothing gets in the way of spirituality like ego and pride. And, you know, it happens to all of us, that if we get too prideful in our paths, we end up getting taken down a peg. And I believe that she does that wholeheartedly, that, you know, if you get too big for your britches, you get slapped. So, oaths. Talking about sincerity and the dedication to one's god and goddess, once one has dedicated, it's a very serious thing. It's a very sacred sort of duty that one has promised oneself to a goddess. And it's not something that I could ever disregard, ever. It's a sacred duty. It's so important that one has made one's vow, one's promise, one's geis in the name and in front of the goddess. Now, there are times when we think we know what the goddess's will is and we promise to do something and then it's wrong, and we end up failing because we have misinterpreted the message, or we were perhaps meant to fail. And this is something I don't know whether or not that a lot of people talk about. Sometimes I honestly feel like we are meant to fall down in our journey with regards to the goddess Morrigan for whatever reason. Maybe we're meant to learn some humility, we're meant to learn some lessons that we need to take on board. Sometimes we get wounded for a reason. And I felt like this with regards to illness. I felt like I got very, very sick on recent events to make me stop and take perspective. Because in the life I lead, I tend to be very Virgo about it. I tend to be on the go, constantly, very busy, doing something all the time. And I think my body burnt out, for one. And it forced me to take a good look at things that I needed to change within myself, things that I needed to stop allowing within myself and without coming within. And it was a frightening moment of clarity that I really feel that she wanted me to undergo, to stop and not be able to be doing all the time, but instead look and listen and really readjust and really listen to one's own heart and mind with regards to spirituality, because there was a lot of outside influence coming through, a lot of judgment as well, but a lot of opinions on the correct and wrong way to worship a goddess, the correct and wrong way to engage and speak and offer prayer or devotion to the goddess. And really, when we take what happens to us as... Grow outside. When we take what happens to us as indicators of things that we need to know, that helps us to connect to deity and the messages that they're putting across, because there are many, many, many ways in which we can receive messages from the divine. Some people receive dreams, some people feel that they connect best through ritual or meditation, some people feel the energies of gods and goddesses around them, some people see things like on a third eye level, on a visualization level, some people hear things on a clairsentience level, a very physical clairsentience level in some cases. Some people feel the energies around them and get a general sense for what they should be doing. Then there are omens and signs in a very physical sense that appear in our lives, and if we look for them, then we start to realise that they're there and they're messages, and they can guide us along the way. I sometimes feel like spirituality is a tangled mess of threads, and we're all just trying to unravel it best we can. And just because somebody got a red thread and untangled that first doesn't mean that we should give up on our blue thread. I think there's a huge tapestry of spirituality going on that we can't possibly comprehend in one lifetime. I think we get snippets and tiny little viewpoints of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I guess trusting yourself is the biggest lesson, and not worrying about too much about what everybody else is doing. It's been a difficult thing for me to realign myself with being okay with my feeling and my opinion with regards to spirituality, because in terms of spiritual realm, we are responsible for our own relationship to deity. And some people get frustrated that people don't take this responsibility seriously, I think, and I understand the frustration. But ultimately, the only person that you're jipping out of by not being responsible is yourself. If you're not committed, if you're not engaging, if you're not doing the work, then the only person that's ultimately losing out is the person involved, that they are not deepening their own spirituality, so what does it matter to everybody else? Largely. I guess if you want physical advice, I would say read the mythos, read around as much as you can, listen to as many people as you can, and if something really, really resonates with you, then take it on board and jot it all down if that's your jazz. You know, if writing everything down helps you to make sense of things, write it all down, keep a journal, keep writing down your dreams, look for the symbolism, look for things that you're seeing everywhere. Recently with me it was wasps, and I was like, why am I seeing wasps everywhere? That's weird. And there was actually a point, I think I've mentioned this on video, I think. If I haven't, then I can't remember because my brain is just so splat after illness. So there was one point where I was really low and really upset, and it's one of these periods when Mama was being quiet, and I was like, Mama, I need you. And I was down by my altar and I was crying my eyes out and I was screaming my lungs out, because this is something that I personally do when I'm feeling really, really bad and I need to reconnect, is just get primal with my emotions. So there you go, get primal with your emotions, maybe that will help. And the curtains were shut because it was summer still. Thankfully we are just about out of it here. And so the curtains were shut and I was like, I need you, Ma, I need you. And a wasp flew in through the window, flew up and over the curtains, which are full length curtains, flew down, flew across to where the altar is, flew around the altar once, and then went back the same way. So back up and over the curtain and out the window. And it was just one of these moments of pure surrealism that, you know, wasps don't normally act that way. They don't normally come flying down and across and around and back. And I was just like, I was touched by that. And I kind of looked into some of the meanings and symbolisms, and there's a strong sisterhood energy to wasps and sort of taking charge and being in control with your feminine power, which is a big message for a lot of daughters of Morrigan, admittedly sons and daughters. Perhaps there is an energy in there for the masculine side of things. I think it depends on how you view gender, but again, that's a different conversation. Although gender may or may not affect how you personally feel that you want to deepen your relationship to the goddess, it's one of those things. If it was me and you were asking how do you do it, I would say that ritual is a very good way. I tell you what, I'll leave you with a message that the goddess left me with when I felt disconnected. I felt disconnected after I was sick for obvious reasons, and I was like, what am I going to do? What am I doing wrong? And I got one line come through through a meditation, which is, why did you stop singing? So there you go. I hope it helps. As I said, I think it's hugely personal, highly individual, and the best thing you can really do is just trust yourself. Trust the journey, trust the process, seek, and you will find it. You'll get there, you know, you'll find your way, one way or another. And mistakes are all part of the process, so don't be afraid of them. Okay, so that's it for this video. Many blessings.